Good evening, guys. We are live. Welcome to the 75th edition of the Boxing Gossip podcast, the home of some above average boxing commentary and some of the finest wallpaper you will see anywhere in the United Kingdom. Podcast number 75, 3/4 of the way there to 100. It feels like only yesterday we started this podcast, but we're doing some serious recording, getting these podcasts rattled off, and appreciate all the support from the guys who've been with us from day dot. Pleased that we are already joined by Jay, by Jet, and by Paul. Haven't actually heard from Irish Tom just yet, so hopefully he'll be joining in the not too distant future. He's usually very good, but we shall see. Packed show as always today. Just to give you guys a bit of a rattle through some of the topics that we're looking to cover. We're going to start with discussing last week's boxing. We're going to move on to some of the major news stories in the sport, and then we'll go ahead and preview some of the fights that are happening next week. Sergey Kovalev, Manuel Charr versus Alexander Ustinov. We will be discussing Amir Khan. We will be discussing the latest Joseph Parker, Anthony Joshua goings-on. We will be discussing the Dillian Whyte situation, the Haye Bellew situation, the Groves Eubank situation. So a lot of ground for us to cover between now and when we call it a day. Thanks to everyone who's with us already, and let's start without further ado by bringing my good friend Paul in. Paul, thanks for joining. Let's start with Carl Frampton, mate. Potentially a performance that left more questions with answers. What's your take, mate?
Do you know what? I thought Carl Frampton looked quite good, given that you know he's had a bit of a layoff and whatnot. You know, he looked really good in the beginning of the fight. For me, he won quite clearly. I see a few people saying that it was quite a bit closer. I mean, look, the guy was durable. That guy, if I'm not mistaken, I think he fought Jojo Diaz a short while ago. That kid, and he's a tough kid, and you know. But I thought Carl looked good, man. I really did. I thought he looked good. The only thing with him is you know, when he was staying on those ropes, he I don't know why he was doing that. Potentially, you know, energy, potentially a stamina problem, bit of rust maybe. But by and large, I thought he looked really good. Given that he's had a bit of a layoff and stuff, I thought he looked really good. He's boxing really well, you know, early on. The knockdown in the 7th was nothing. That was a slip. I don't know why they ruled that a knockdown. The punch didn't even connect. You can see on the replays, you know, he just slips like. I don't know what everybody else thought. I haven't seen. I don't know if you made a video on it or what. I don't know what you thought or Jet or anything, but I thought he looked really good.
So my take on the knockdown, I thought he was unlucky. He himself on the post-fight interview said in his mind it was a 50-50 call, because whilst it was a slip, a punch was landed during the slip, and the referee kind of said it's one of those, Carl, where you've been caught on the way down, it is unfortunate, etc. So yeah, he was actually on the fence on it. I thought he was a little bit unlucky. As for the scoring, Paul, I actually was one of those who had it relatively close. I actually had Frampton winning the fight by a single point, although that was bearing in mind that I did score around 10-8 to Garcia because of the knockdown, and that knockdown is questionable whether it was legit. So I had it as a close fight. For me, it left more questions than answers. I was disappointed that Frampton seemed to fade throughout points in the fight. I thought he wasted a lot of energy despite looking good early on. Yeah, I just wonder if he's lost a step, actually. But, you know, do you think that's harsh given the length of time he's been out of the ring and, you know, given the fact he's coming off a loss, etc.?
I mean, I see your point, but I think it probably is, you know, the fact that he's come off a loss and the fact that he's been out for, what has he been out for? Is it about a year?
He's been out, I don't know if it's quite a year. I think it's about 10 months. But for me, people are blaming it on ring rust. I find it hard to blame it on ring rust because I thought he came out and looked perfect for 3 or 4 rounds. He looked, you know, absolutely fantastic. He didn't look rusty to me. It was more that I thought he struggled, you know?
Yeah, I think it was his fitness. I mean, look, he's one of these guys, isn't he? That I worry. I mean, Gervonta Davis is another one like him, where he's kind of like struggling to make the weight he's at, but he's not really big enough to go up any higher. I don't think he's even very big, and I mean the size difference between him and Horatio Garcia was vast. It was very, very evident. And it was very evident that Garcia was kind of like thought he was very basic, but he was kind of like he was clearly hurting Frampton at points. I mean, I had it 7-3. I thought Kyle won the first 5 rounds for me, even though 4 and 5 were quite close rounds. I still thought Kyle just about won the round. I thought he just, kind of like edged it. I mean, look, he's kind of like coming back to his best. I think it was a good fight for him to kind of like kick back. And I'd just like to see him get a bit more active, like a little bit more active. I think he can make that weight if he's a little bit more rigid and a little bit more disciplined in the way he approaches stuff. Whether the layoffs played a part in that, I don't know, but I do worry for him if he does try and move up, because I just don't think he's big enough, and I certainly don't think he's going to have the power to bother some of the guys if he moves up. Do you know what I mean? Because he didn't seem to, his punches, even though he caught Garcia with some real nice shots, they didn't seem to. Now I know Garcia was tough, but they didn't seem to bother him at all. Not at all.
I think you make some good points about the weight. That Horatio Garcia was noticeably bigger, and he had actually been competing in the division below not that long in the past. So, Frampton hasn't made the weight for his last 2 weigh-ins. I know this one was made at a catch weight, but he's not getting any younger. If he's struggling to make featherweight, and for me, he looks very small at featherweight. The idea of him moving up to super feather, I think he'd really struggle. I think you're spot on, Paul. Paul, featherweight's a strong division. Lee Selby, Gary Russell Jr., Leo Santa Cruz. Carl Frampton, for me, he's definitely a fighter with the ability to win a world championship. I don't think that's in doubt. But given the state of that division, given the state of the existing champions, can he beat any of those guys? Would you pick him to beat any of those guys?
I don't know. I mean, there's a chance he'd beat Santa Cruz again. I think Selby's all wrong for him, and Gary Russell is probably. I mean, Gary Russell's probably going to be a bit too quick. I agree with you, mate. I think he's in a difficult position. Like I said, there's a few boxers that are in that position at the minute. Gervonta Davis is the only one that springs to mind, but it's occurred to me a few times with a couple of other people as well that, they're kind of like they're having a lot of success in their careers, but they're kind of like for one reason or another, things are just, they kind of like almost seem like they're cornered in certain ways, and yeah, I don't know. We may look back at this in a couple of years' time and say that, he kind of like the Santa Cruz win was kind of like his pinnacle. You never know. I mean, how old is he? 29, 30?
30.
He's not old, but he's not, he's not a 22-year-old.
Yeah. They get older earlier in that division as well. The other one I forgot to mention, Paul, is Oscar Valdez, who's another champion in that division, but he's no slouch either.
No, and he's got quite a bit of power, Oscar Valdez. I mean, I don't think Valdez is as good a fighter as Carl Frampton overall. I think Carl Frampton's a much better fighter. He's a much better boxer, a lot slicker. But Valdez has got a lot of power, man. Like, I could see Valdez icing him, like, to be quite honest. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I'm a fan of Carl Frampton. I like him. I think he's got a lot of talent. It's kind of like, for Frampton fans, I guess the hope is that it is really just about the layoff you know, coming off a loss and whatnot, and he just needs to get back active and needs to get back on the horse, so to speak. So let's just hope he can do that. But well done to him for the win, I guess.
100%. Yeah, good, fair comments, Paul. I'll come back to you for some comments on the undercard in just a little bit. Let me bring Jay in next. Jay, some interesting discussion there. I had Frampton by a single point. Paul, he said he had it 7-3, so maybe with the knockdown, Paul had it to Frampton by 3 points, which I don't think is a ridiculous scorecard at all. Where do you sit?
I'm Paul on this one. I think it was wider than what you're saying. For me, though, I come at it from a different angle, really. I think talking about ring rust is definitely an issue. But if you look at those first, 3-4 rounds, he was cruising. He was absolutely cruising. It was almost like a sparring session to me. I just don't think his head was right. That's what I purely think. I think he thinks that a level of this, this is an easy night's work. He was moving well. He just looked huge confidence for me. But I think sometimes when a fighter goes into a fight like this and they lose too much confidence, it's going to sort of reflect later on, because then they can kind of lose a bit of concentration or get caught out a little bit where they wouldn't do usually. And I just think that fight was a comeback fight. It was at home, maybe going into it a little bit too relaxed and a little bit too overconfident and a little bit too comfortable. And those are the things that can make you, slip up. He's also had issues out of the ring, as we know. So, there is, issues there. So, you've kind of got to look at that. I think it's more of a mindset, really, than a quality or a physical thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So with that in mind, do you think the next fight will be more revealing than this one?
Yeah, most definitely. I said last week that I wasn't really, excited about the fight. I didn't think it was going to be much. And as I said, I watched the first round and I just thought, this is an easy night's work. He'll do this all day. He'll go the distance. He'll do. If he gets the knockout, he gets the knockout. And you can tell. As I said, I think you can tell in his body language. That's the way he was looking. He was dancing a little bit. He was moving off. He was popping the jab, looking for those big counters. He just that thought, I'm way above this level and this is an easy night's work for me. And as I said, it's proven in the past, history has told you that many fighters who are on top of their game go into fights like this and it can be a major slip up for them. Billy Joe Saunders, for instance, not concentrating on his game when he fought in Glasgow and nearly, and put in a terrible performance, but it got away with it. And I think that's the same with Carl Frampton. As Paul said, for the first 5 rounds, for me, he won easy. He won easy the first 5 rounds, and then the slip came, then the overconfidence, then the loss of concentration. Let's just get it done, get it over with. And so many fighters nowadays have these fights where they'll come off massive fights, and then they'll go against someone who's not expected to do much, and kind of lose focus on what they're trying to do. It's the focus really comes when it's a tough test and there's a good chance or a strong possibility that you could get beaten, and that's when you tend to see the best performances out of those type of fighters. It's very rare you get a fighter, even Floyd Mayweather. There's been times where he hasn't performed the way he could. Madonna, for instance, the first one, he wasn't great. Second fight, he adapted, knew he got to do better, and had his eye on the ball. But the first time he didn't. And sometimes there's so much ability that he can get over these fights, and get away with it by the skin of his teeth. But against someone of a better opposition, he has to be putting his A game, and I think he will.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think that's bang on, Jay. But with that being said, as we discussed, the quality in this division is actually very, very deep. Valdez, Selby, Santa Cruz, Russell Jr. This Carl Frampton, who, is now in his 30s, who's finding it a bit tough to make the weight, who's had the problems outside the ring, who does seem to have this tendency to either tire or hit flat spots, so we say, in fights. Do you actually think you could pick him to beat some of those world champions?
I think he's got half a chance, definitely. I think he's in a fight. You know, he's
Yeah.
not one that's not going to get walked over, because he's a very, very good fighter. But I think inside, possibly himself, he knows that he's getting to that point now. I think every fighter, or not, knows that they're getting to a point where they're not maybe as slick as they used to be, not have the engine that they used to have, not make the weight as easily. And hence why I think the jump into a different, obviously there's had issues with McGuigan possibly over finances. So the jump there is a thought maybe in the back of his head that I've got X amount of fights to go. I need to cash in, and then I'm on my way. And I think that could be playing necessarily on his mind. But going back to what you said, I think, you know, he could possibly, most definitely, you know, be in a fight with any of those guys. You know, not necessarily he's going to come out the victor, but he's, you know, it's rightful that he's named with those guys and as a contender to any of those guys' titles.
Yeah, I think he's in a fight with all of those guys. You know, Carl's a good fighter. He's got great experience and great attributes. The difficulty is I don't think I could pick him confidently to beat any of them. And unless he bucks up his ideas, for me, from the performance last week, I'd actually pick some of the guys who are not currently world champions to beat him, being frank. And I know that's an unpopular opinion. But, you know, how confident would you be that the Carl Frampton we saw last week would actually beat Scott Quigg? You know, I think it's an open question. Am I being harsh there, Jay, or do you think that's up in the air now?
No, I think so. I think when you're talking about your Gary Russells and your top-end elite fighters, that's a different conversation. When you're talking about Scott Quigg or the bottom end of that tier of that top 10, top 15, I don't think we can go off what we saw at the weekend. I honestly really don't, because he'll know himself that that was not a great performance from him, and he knows he must do better. Now, as I said, it's like any good athlete when they're in the final, when they're in the final 100 meters, when they're in the tennis, for whatever it is, they step their game up, and it goes to a different level. It will bring something else out of them, and I think he has the ability to mix it. I couldn't say categorically that he would beat, you know, Gary Russell Jr., that he'd beat Sam again. I couldn't categorically say it, but I'd say he would be in the fight. He's dropped that much of a level that we could just write him off completely, because I think he's just a very good talent. If he wasn't as talented as he was, well, then most definitely. But, you know, the guy, we need to appreciate what he's done. And what he's recently done. It's not like he's been doing it years ago. You know, this is a guy that's coming off 2 big fights, and one of them, you know, he was an exceptionally good champion. So, you know, I think it's up into the air till we see him fight, and then we know when he fights really in that top 5.
I hear you, mate. I hear you. Okay, thanks for that. I'll come back to you on the undercard in just a minute. I'll come to Jet next. I can see Irish Tom has joined, so welcome, Irish. We'll bring you in off the Jet. Jet, thanks for joining, mate. You're hearing what Paul and Jay are saying there. They had it slightly clearer to Frampton than I did. Paul and Jay both had it by, you know, sounds like 3 or 4 rounds. What was your take, Jet?
Yeah, I managed to just about watch, you know, a few of the undercard fights and the main event, and I thought, you know, Frampton looked good for the first few rounds. I had it 6-4 plus the point. So basically, I had Frampton winning by a point. I had him nicking the fight by a point.
That's exactly the scorecard is me. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a really close fight. I thought he made it a lot tougher for himself. The thing is, obviously, he's coming off a long layoff, and you know, the factors that I've already spoken about, we don't really need to go over again. I mean, we've spoken about it twice already here on the podcast. I mean, what hasn't really been, you know, discussed is his move to Jamie Moore. Did Jamie Moore give him the right advice in the corner? We don't know. I didn't hear too much in the corner. I was, you know, I was a bit perplexed as to what was going on in the corner, to be honest. So that's kind of one dynamic, obviously, that you know, that hasn't been looked at, and I think maybe people need to look at that a bit more as well. I'm not saying Jamie Moore is a bad trainer. I'm not saying that at all, because he obviously done some stuff well with Carl in the first, you know, at least 3-4 rounds that Carl Frampton looked, he looked really, really good in those few rounds. He looked like the Carl Frampton and the Jackal of old. But, the Jackal seemed to lose his, tenacity, I guess, in the second half of the fight. He got, I thought he got a bit worn down. And if that was a 12-round fight, I thought, Garcia was coming on by far the stronger, and I thought Frampton was tiring. As I said, whether or not that's, the long layoff or the lifestyle or, change in trainer, strength and conditioning in his new camp, we don't know. All these questions only Mr. Frampton can answer himself, I guess. But I guess it's a win on, it's a win on the record. It's some ring rust shaken off, 10 rounds under his belt. So all is not negative, but I did think he didn't look the same Carl Frampton in there. I thought, especially in the second half of the fight, I thought he was, he was struggling with the pace.
Yeah, where do you stand on him facing the other world champions? Is there a world champion out there who you could still pick, Carl Frampton to beat?
I think the realistic, but so the realistic chance that Carl has to beating someone is Oscar Valdez, but that fight for me isn't very likely. I don't think that's a fight on the horizon for either guy. Oscar Valdez, he's kind of doing his own thing. I think is he with Top Rank, if I'm correct?
I believe so, mate. Yeah.
So he's kind of doing his own thing with Top Rank, obviously. Gary Russell's with Al Heyman and wherever other promoter, and he's based out in the States. So Santa Cruz is facing Mares, I think, next. So they're trying to get rid of that regular title. I think Selby's style is wrong for him. Gary Russell, if he's active, I think Gary Russell's a big problem for anyone in the division. And Santa Cruz has shown ability to adapt to any sort of fight. He boxed a bit in the second fight, and he gave Carl Frampton a different sort of outlook on his style. So those three guys, the latter three guys I named, they're very difficult fights for Carl Frampton. I've always said Selby's. I think, as Paul said, I think it was Selby's all wrong for Carl Frampton. I think, Selby's just his style here. I know it's a bit pity-patty at times, but his style here would just, he would force Carl to push the pace. And I don't think Carl's at his best pushing the pace. I think he's best at that sort of 3/4 range and, being very, very explosive, similar to sort of George Groves, if that makes any sense, but very, very explosive. So I don't think him pushing the pace is the best sort of tactic for the Jackal. So yeah, Selby, Santa Cruz obviously can adapt, as I said. Gary Russell, we don't know because he's not active enough, I guess. But Oscar Valdez is probably the most beatable guy out of those guys, and that's not a gimme fight either. He's a fairly solid fighter as well. So yeah, that's the only guy I'd say I'd give him a more than a 60% chance, possibly probably 65% against Oscar Valdez, and I only give 65% because we haven't seen Oscar Valdez against a top opponent. So it's difficult to kind of measure, I guess.
Yeah, final question from me. Obviously, talking about these matchups, really putting that to one side, realistically, what do you think will happen with Frampton? Do you think Selby will beat Warrington and they'll fight Selby? Do you think that Frank will look to milk the ticket sales in Belfast and just get Frampton out against another sort of fringe opponent and sell out another arena? Do you think there's any chance whatsoever of getting Leo Santa Cruz over here for a third fight? I'm sceptical. What do you think is the realistic route they will take, mate?
It's difficult now with Carl Frampton, obviously, since he's left Cyclone and Barry McGuigan. It's kind of a catch-22 because obviously they had like a plan with him that to get the Santa Cruz fight, the trilogy fight. If not, they would move on to Lee Selby, and they had some logical step. I mean, the logical step here is obviously Selby versus Warrington. That's a fight for the IBF mandatory. Warrington's the mandatory, so that fight will be forced on Selby unless he wants to vacate and move up or fight for another title. So that's obviously the logical route, that because he's with Frank Warren and Selby has, he's working as a pay-as-you-fight, deal with Frank, and obviously Warrington's tied in with Frank as well. So that's probably the route that they're going to go down. But, I wouldn't be surprised in the interim to see Carl Frampton, face someone in the top 20, I guess, or something like that, and someone beatable, but someone who's gonna bring the fight. He's gonna be game. He's not gonna roll over. He's a decent opponent. He's a decent name, but someone inside the top 20 at featherweight. Good money for Carl as well if they can bring him back to Belfast. Don't think there's any chance of Santa Cruz coming to Belfast. I think Carl would have to travel again to get that fight. Which is a shame, but I guess that's the way the game goes. If you want these big fights, and obviously Santa Cruz has won the last fight, and he won in I wouldn't say convincing fashion, but he won he won well enough. So I'd say Carl would definitely have to travel. The smart sort of money, I guess, is putting it down on sort of the IBF title and that route. I would like to see him obviously go for the for Oscar Valdez and try and unify or something like that after, because he'd make even more money. But that's as I said, that's how the business is. The business side sometimes takes precedence over the actual boxing side. Yeah, always the way. Okay, Jep. All right, thanks for that, mate. I will come back to you, and we will bring you back in when it's time to discuss the undercard, which will not be in the distant future. Let me go over and bring Irish Tom in. Tom, give us a quick sound check, mate.
How's it going there?
Okay, I'm just turning your volume up, mate. You should be good to go. All good here, mate. Tom, thanks for joining. Just to fill you in on what you maybe haven't heard. So far, oh, you've heard it all, of you? Okay, so all four of us picking Frampton as the winner. Two of us by a point. Two of us by 3 points or 4 points. So some disagreement as to how easily he did it. What was your take? How did you see the fight? How close was it?
I thought it was a close fight. I gave it to Frampton by one round, 1 point. 6 rounds to 4 with a knockdown. I thought, it's a strange fight because the rounds that Frampton won, he tended to win by a country mile, and the ones that he lost were reasonably close affairs. But that's the way we score these fights. So I thought it was a close fight. If Garcia was the home fighter, going a draw with a knockdown to him, or 6-4 even. So I thought Carl looked really good in places, but his legs were gone. His legs weren't there. He started being resting on the ropes like Canelo, looking for. Canelo was able to do it. Canelo is slipping and sliding. And Frampton was saying post-fight that himself and Jamie Moore were working on sitting on the ropes and defending, and he was saying I let him hit me 5 or 6 times before I responded instead of 2 or 3. So it looked like he was getting busted up there. The other thing is, your man was a giant compared to him.
Yeah, and that was a guy from the lighter weight class. Can you believe it?
Yeah, well, Frampton looks, it's hard to believe Frampton can make 126. Very hard. Carl Frampton looks like an elite top 10 pound for pound fighter. And there's other times when he looks shot. Floyd Mayweather is out for 2 years, and he comes back and he schools Marquez. He's a pound for pound fighter. And when Frampton comes back after 10 months off for the back half of a fight. So, to be honest with you, I think that, we'll see now if he's either shot or he's not putting the work in. But I think that he's not in love with the game. And I think he's just cashing out. you know, when these sports stars, they start saying, oh yeah, you know, I'm really back into it, I love it, and you know, I'm really eager to go training now. It's like they're trying to convince themselves and nobody else. It's like Cleverly before, like fighting Badu Jack, saying, oh, this is not about me just turning up, this is about, you know, going on to win more world titles and stuff. And you're like, going, give us a fucking break. I think, you know, you should not be gassing after 3 rounds.
Yeah. You wonder what he's been doing outside of the regular period.
Yeah, you know, well, like, I know he's had his, you know, I'd say he's probably had a bad breakup with Barry McGuigan. I was just watching an IFL interview from today, it's actually a few weeks old, with Paddy Barnes and the 2 Conlon brothers, and they're sitting there and they're chatting, and when Barry McGuigan's name comes up, one of them or a few of them that are off camera start going like for a snake. So good. Who knows what's going on there at the McGuigans? But so, you know, I'd say those are in the know going on. So, you know, maybe he's just being depressed and falling out of love with boxing, you know, and you know, maybe he'll rekindle it. But if you ask me, 30 super bantam or featherweight, you know, he's gone to Frank. Do you ever, like, the body language between him and Frank is not looking great, you know? Like, I just think he's got a 4 or 5 fight deal with Frank. He's probably going to make £4 or £5 million on the deal, and up, we'll never hear from Carl Frampton again. And there's a good chance he might get cleaned out in one of those fights.
Yeah. Do you kind of share the opinion that you'd make him an underdog against all of the world titleists at that weight division?
It depends. Like, you know, Frampton had a bad, you know, he had a bad performance before against your man, the Mexican lad, when he got knocked down twice. Yeah. So, you know, and he came back and he schooled quick, and, you know, he went on to beat Santa Cruz. So if his head's in the right place, you know, maybe, you know, the thing is, he might literally have understand why he could be so out of shape, because he had one camp and nearly made weight for the other camp, doing a Tyson Fury. I think he'd beat Josh Warrington, no hassle. And people, I think, are overrating Lee Selby. A good fighter, but he's looked like dog piss at that weight for the last fight or two. He's struggling to make that weight. So, you know, him against Frampton, it could be 2 guys who are not able to make the weight and struggling a bit. So, I think I've always got said Selby is a bad style for Frampton, but you know that, you know, Selby, we haven't seen Selby fighting anybody that we could say is on the level of the people Frampton has fought. Best opponent, I think, it's Eric Hunter.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, Selby's best opponent, Eric Hunter.
Yeah, Gradovich is useless, man. Gradovich got bet 12-0 like 3 or 4 fights in a row after that. You know, Gradovich is barely British champion level.
But based on that, it's probably Eric Hunter then, Tom.
I think, yeah, Eric Hunter is a very good fighter, I think, you know, but just obviously mental.
Yeah, there's obviously some difficulties there. Okay, cool. No, thanks for that, Tom. Let's. We were going to move on to the undercard, so let me just ask you about that now. Zolani Tete won in 5 or 6 seconds, I think it was. Paddy Barnes and John O'Carroll put in career high performances. Jamie Conlon lost in a very, very tough fight to watch against Eubank, who looked legit world class. Some good performances on that undercard, Tom.
Yeah, like, for me, that was the best Frank Warren card since the Billy Joe Saunders, Chris Eubank card.
Oh, with Fury, Chisora, Skeet, Gavin, that card.
That card, yeah. Like, little did we expect it, because, you know, I wasn't up for card. Like, last week you were saying, what do you make of this? And I was like, going, oh, God. And, like, even, like, this is the first I saw Paddy Barnes. Paddy Barnes was good. He looked really good. I'm not a fan of Paddy Barnes. You know, I thought he's very amateur-y style. But in that one, he showed spite. He finished the guy. He looked good. and Cajas, he bet the. And that's a that's a definition there, beating the brakes off someone. Yeah. You know, it was never even remotely competitive for 30 seconds. Fan of Jamie Conlan, but you know, there's just levels. Jamie's a British to European level fighter, and he's gone up there against a very good champion. That super flyweight division is about as stacked nearly as it is in boxing. Any of the four champions, I think people would be thinking like are nearly all 50-50 fights against each other. It's few a division that we can say that, and there's probably the top 10 in the super fly division as good as any other division in boxing. Who else was there? John O'Carroll. I didn't really see that, only the knockout. And what else was Solani Tete?
Yeah,
Solani Tete. He bored me to death again. I fell asleep halfway through that fight.
What can you say? You look absolutely useless.
I know.
Yeah.
Like Ryan Burnett. I don't know. They put him near him at all.
A lot of people on my Twitter seem to think Burnett's a favourite in that fight, and I see Adam Booth was out there to scout Zolani Tete. To be fair, it's not really the kind of fight where you learn too much, I guess, from going out to scout him.
Look, Ryan Burnett has done well. He's unified by probably beating two of the worst. Who did he win the title from? Yeah, two of the worst champions in world boxing. He's probably beaten
Lee Haskins and Zanat Zakionov.
Yeah, you know, Zakionov is not too bad, but Lee Haskins wasn't good. You know, like, so he's a unified champion. But we'll see, like, I don't, you know, Zolani, you know, just the business of boxing is terrible. Like, if you're unfortunate enough to come from a country like that hasn't got a big boxing following, like South Africa or Namibia or somewhere like that, you know, the only way you can do well is by knocking people out. You'll never get a card. You'll never be able to sell a ticket. You know, someone like Solani Tete is a world level fighter. You know, he probably is in the top 20, 30, 40 pound for pound fighters. But nobody knows him. He doesn't sell 5 tickets, and he'll do extremely well. You know, he'll be avoided like Rigo. Taking that. I could be wrong, but I just can't see it.
I think, is it fair to say Tete's skill and his ability is actually going to work against him? Because like,
of course, it's going to
be fucking avoided like the plague. He'll destroy Burnett. I don't think Burnett's on Tete's level at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tete would destroy him. As you say, Paul, I don't think there's a better word than destroy. Tete is probably the worst fighter globally for risk versus reward. He actually makes Rigondeaux look high risk. Low risk, high reward. The chance to beat Zolani Tete. I mean, in hindsight, what was they doing? Putting Paul Butler in with him? You know, you're right. It's exactly one of them, Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll tell you what they did, Gossip. They were like us, you know, as armchair experts. They looked on Box Rec and they saw he had 3 losses. That's what they did.
Well, I think that probably is it, Tom.
Yeah, and they probably had no video, and they said, "Ah, fuck it, he can't be that good. We'll offer him £5,000 and see what happens."
He's beaten no one, and he's got a few losses. Yeah,
you know. Yeah.
Somebody commented the other day on one of my videos, and it wasn't a troll comment at all, but they just said, "I haven't really checked out this Zolani Tete. I don't really follow the lower weight classes, and I've looked him up on BoxRec, and he looks useless." And I had to say, you're actually going to have to see it to believe it. Like, this is a top level fighter, and it's one of them, unfortunately, where BoxRec just isn't going to give you what you need. Yeah. All right. Cheers.
He's got the hardest to pronounce name in world boxing as well. I'm going to give it a go. I've actually been practicing it. It's Lani.
What you're going to?
I've been practicing it. Wait now, here. Lani. It's click language. Heard the X is actually a click.
Yeah, it's like you make a click sound in terms to yeah. I think I'll stick with
bizarre, like
until
it's really hard to do. I can't fucking do it at all.
Just of doing my best to get as close as I can. Paul, Paul, let's come back to yourself, mate. Obviously, talking Tete there. Eubank, Ancajas, for me, not a million miles off a world-class performance as well. Some real quality. What stood out for you on the undercard?
Him as well. That I can't. What's his name?
Eubank Ancajas or Ancajas.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Mick Conlan. I've never been a huge fan of Jamie Conlan. He's okay. After about I think it was the second round, or it might have even been the first round. He was absolutely beating the brakes off him over in the corner. Like he must have threw about 10 body shots. And you see Jamie Conlan's face at the end of the round. It's like he looked like relieved that the bell had gone. He was like, "What the fuck have you gotten me into here? Like, who picked this guy?" You know? I think he does look world class. I thought he looked really good. Tete, fucking hell. I mean, like, what is there to say? Well placed shot, well placed right hook, and just iced the guy. I mean, nice punch. I'm a big fan of Zolani Tete. I think he's probably the best guy in. He's probably the best guy in that division. Do you think he's the best guy in that division?
Well, a lot of people, I must admit, I haven't seen too much of the guy, but a lot of people are telling me the name Luis Neri. I've had that comment on a lot of my previous videos. Jet will be the man to ask.
Neri?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got to admit I haven't seen him, but
he beat Yamanaka.
Let's ask Jet. Jet, is this Neri? Is he as good? Is he the same sort of level?
What, for Tete or?
Yeah, for Tete.
I mean, he's a good fighter. He had a good performance against Yamanaka. He actually beat him, but I think he was on the. Well, they said he failed a PD test. So I don't know. Something's going on. I don't know what the WBC are doing. If they're stripping him, I think he had some contaminated meat, which is the excuse or something like that. So he's a good fighter, but I think they definitely ordered the rematch between him and Yamanaka. But beating Yamanaka, if he wasn't, obviously, if it was a mistake or whatever, and he's not on the juice, and if he could do it again, then yeah, he's a good fighter. He's obviously undefeated. I think he's like 18-0 or something like that. So he's a solid fighter, but I think Tete is the best in that weight class. You know, by far, he's the best at bantamweight.
Yeah, so do I. Although I've got to admit, I haven't seen Neri, so.
Good fighter. He's quite exciting. He's a bit of a banger. So if anyone wants to go watch him,
I'll check him out definitely now.
You're both picking Tete to beat Burnett if that fight were to happen. I take it.
I think Tete beats anyone at bantamweight or super bantamweight. I think featherweight's a bit of a stretch, but I definitely think he beats anyone at bantam and super bantam.
Super bantam quite light, Jet, in terms of quality.
Yeah, I think the.
Jed, you're not saying he's beating Rigondeaux now. Come on.
But Rigondeaux is not actually fighting at super bantamweight next, so I'm not including
next,
him.
But he's a super bantam.
Yeah, he won't. He'll move back down because he's not even big. He's not even big at super bantamweight. I actually think Tete probably would beat Rigondeaux at this point.
Yeah, I think Tete would beat Rigondeaux.
Look, Rigo's great at what he does. Yeah, he's a long-range sniper, but that's all he does. He's very one-dimensional. Like, to be quite honest,
one-dimensional me arse. Now, don't be giving me that. Don't be. This is boxing casuals. Just because the fella knocked out Paul Butler, they're saying he beats fucking Rigondeaux. Now, lads, come on.
No, I don't. Look, I don't think he's one-dimensional. But it's not just because Tete beat Paul Butler. There's the doubt around Rigondeaux at present. You know, how inactive, how old. You know, when was the last time he fought anyone of any note? You know, you could be the best fighter ever, Tom, and there'd still be reasons for doubt. You know, if Floyd Mayweather came back to boxing riding Pegasus to the ring, you would question someone at that age who'd been so inactive, who hadn't fought a class boxer for so long. It's the same with Rigondeaux, and he's in a fight that he's got no business being in, for my money. And you know, it's going to be hard for him to come back from that. And against Tete, you know, Rigondeaux's an old, low-volume guy who gets hurt in fights. I think it's a tough matchup, mate.
I agree, and I think also probably after the Lomachenko fight, I think Rigondoux's not going to be the same fighter again. If you look at guys that move up a couple of divisions, I think Lomachenko's going to absolutely beat the brakes off of him. And if you look at guys, like say Kell Brook fighting Triple G and that, he was never the same again afterwards, and he will never be the same again afterwards. Rigo's age is inactivity.
Can I quote you on this? I'm going to be quoting all you fuckers here. When Rigondeaux goes in and does a brilliant fucking performance against Lomachenko and gets robbed, all you fuckers can go back here and talk to me about Zolani Tete in the same league.
So you think he's going to beat Loma, do you?
I think that is a very competitive fight, right? And you guys are saying he's done nothing, and what's he done for me lately? He's gone up 2 divisions to fighting who a lot of people think is the best fighter in the world, including people in this panel.
Well, he hasn't yet, has he? And we don't know how he's going to do. What are you going to say if it's knocked out in the first round, Tom?
Yeah, look, all you guys are putting Zolani Tete on the same level for a knockout of Paul Butler and no other performance. Barring that one, a domestic one punch.
No, Tom. Rigondeaux gets a career off one champion, hasn't he? If we're honest.
Yeah, Danair.
Yeah, I mean, Rigondeaux has made his entire name off one performance.
And to be honest, Danair,
right, boys, come back to me.
Then either. I don't think Danair was the same fighter as he was in a lower. He's a bit more plodding by that time as well.
Resume is not. Look, Tete's resume is weak, but Rigondoux's resume is, it's not as strong as some people make out.
Yeah, I know. He's only a double Olympic champion, and he's only like
we're talking
world
about
champion
professional resume, though.
And he's only beaten pound for pound level opposition. But let's wait. We're going to come back, and I'm telling you, I'm going to roast all you fuckers when we come back in December after that fight. And you guys are going to be saying he's going to get the brakes beat off him and all this kind of stuff. You fuckers just wait. I hope the chat are fucking listening.
I've got a prediction. So what is it? December 6th, is it? So the podcast after December 6th, my prediction is Irish Tom won't be on this podcast.
Yeah, I think Irish Tom will get a horrible bout of the flu is my prediction.
Yeah.
Oh, here, look, I've been on every show bar one. Fucking, choked it against a geriatric fucking small man. Paul was nowhere to be seen for about 2 months.
Shut up. Paul was in hospital, mate.
Well, you're right, Tom. You are right. Your attendance record is exemplary. I will give you that. But all I'm saying is the hype around Rigondoux's resume. I mean, it's interesting. Like, we talk about Rigondoux's resume, and the first thing you say is, "Oh, let's forget he's a double Olympic champion." Like by that measure. Isn't Virginia Singh an Olympic champion? Isn't Harrison an Olympic champion?
He's not a double Olympic Harrison. To say that not every amateur becomes a good pro, but you can say that Rigondeaux has been the standout super bantamweight for the last 5 years, and everybody with a pulse has fucking avoided him. Yeah, Frampton fucking wouldn't go near him. Quigg wouldn't go near him. Santa Cruz moved up to get away from him. All of these fucking who were calling elite fighters, none of them would even step in the ring with Rigondeaux. Like Carl Frampton was a top 10 pound for pound fighter, and he wouldn't be seen in the same fucking continent as Rigondeaux.
You're right, Tom. You are right. These are valid points. But the fact remains that Rigondeaux has had one elite level fight his entire career, and it was years ago. That is good, all well and good, but that does not give me confidence to pick him in a fight in a couple of weeks.
Okay, but I'm just waiting now. Just come back to me, you boys, and I've only stuck my neck out, I think, like 2 or 3 times in this podcast. One was Frampton against Santa Cruz. The other was Brazil would take Joshua rounds. And this is the third one. I'm sticking my neck out. I want you guys to note this and come back to me. And in a month's time, I'm going to roast the fucking lot of yous.
Yeah. Well, I know you like the old 50p each way, Tom. Rigondeaux is 4-1, I believe. Will you be having a fiver on that?
No. I think Rigondeaux will not like. I don't think Rigondeaux will stop Lomachenko, and he'll have to stop him, or win every single round clear to win that fight. But my prediction is for him to lose on points, but for him to be very competitive with Lomachenko, and for it to be a reasonably fair, a reasonably close fight. And in reality, when we think about that, he's really a fighter who's 3 weight divisions below the other guy. This is not Kell Brook going up against Golovkin.
Into the fight, if
this is not Kell Brook going up against Golovkin. This is a super elite guy, like a Floyd level elite kind of guy in Rigondeaux going up to fight.
Fighting Alexander Usyk, I'd pick Alexander Usyk. It's one of the reasons that I'm so confident behind my pick. For what it's worth, I'll be on Lomachenko by knockout.
Can anybody remember the Rigondeaux Cordoba fight? Can anybody remember that fight?
I do, yeah, I remember it. I remember it well.
Okay, so like anybody that's wondering about whether Rigondeaux is going to be able to deal with Loma needs to watch that fight, because every time that fight went inside the pocket, Rigo looked fucking terrible. And that's why I say he's one-dimensional. He can stay at range, he can dance around, and he can pot shot from long range. He can't do much else, mate.
Man, Paul, like, is this so you're going to make that argument, and when I make the opposite argument about Loma actually losing a similar type fight, you dismiss it? What fight was that? Was that a 6th fight?
Cordoba didn't punch.
Was that a 6th fight?
Cordoba didn't punch Rigo in the balls 120 times.
It doesn't matter. Was that a 6th fight? That was a 6th fight, I think, and that was the first time he was up against anybody of any note. And it was Rigo's definitely worst performance. But people forget that Cordoba was a good fighter. He was a world-class fighter.
Cordoba was a good fighter, but when have you, since that, have you seen tell me the fight in which Rigo goes inside and looks good in the pocket?
It all depends whether, one is whether the guy is able to get in on him. Yeah. Name another fighter who's actually managed to get into the pocket with any regularity against Rigo.
Well, what I'm saying is Lomachenko will. It's guaranteed.
I know you're saying that. That's what you're saying. And I'm saying that there's a good chance he won't. And if any man is going to stop him and break up his rhythm, it's Rigondeaux.
I mean,
look, if Lomachenko manages to get on the inside and get on dominating him, it's going to be a long night for Rigo. But for me, that's a big if. That's like saying all these pressure fighters who tried to pressure Floyd and they couldn't do it. Maybe only one of them really truly managed to do. 2 of them, Castillo and Maidana, and everybody else didn't manage to. They all had their plans and it didn't work. So just because one fighter manages to get in on the inside on a fighter doesn't mean every other fighter can do it. And we'll find out. But I just wait. I'll eat all the humble pie.
You sit on the fence. He basically won. Well, Rigo won't win, but it'll be close. It's like some saying he's going to a fight with Lomachenko and he's not going to.
I'm sorry, you broke up there, Jay.
Oh, Jay's internet's gone.
Fuck it.
We've lost you, buddy.
Say again, Jay. Oh, he's gone. Yeah. Anyway, here. I think we can stop this Rigo talk.
And it's one because after Rigo does get knocked out, there's very little places for him to go, I suspect. And the Zolani Tete fight may be one of them. So let's see. Let's see. Maybe all these answers will get questions. And look, when I'm picking this fight, I want to say it's not necessarily that I think Rigondeaux is a bad fighter. It's not. It's that I'm looking at the facts in a cold, hard light of day. Look, if this was a fight when Rigo was 5 years younger at his weight class, when he'd been active, maybe I'd pick him. But I'm looking at the facts of the matter. I think Floyd Mayweather is a better technical fighter than Chris Eubank Jr. If the two guys fought right now, I may well pick Chris Eubank Jr. because there'd be so much against Floyd in that fight. And I see there being so much against Rigo in this fight. I view that the challenge is insurmountable. But we will see.
I mean, that's
One
a bad
thing to say-
example because Eubank's fucking about 5 weight classes above him. But I'd say someone like Spence, like I think that would be a more comparable.
No, because there are so many. I think Rigo's a bantamweight. So you've got bantam, super bantam, feather, super feather. You know, Floyd is a welter. You got light middle, middle, super middle. You know, I actually think it's a comparable.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, true.
Okay, but one thing that you guys are forgetting is that Rigo's got the longer reach. And that's very important in this fight. He's got longer reach, boys. And Lomachenko has got short arms. Lomachenko is a fucking T-Rex.
I can't wait to find out. Let's, one for the hardcore to really savor. Let's look forward to it. I'm going to bring the other guys back in. Jet, let's come back to yourself, mate. Just a quick one, because it came up earlier in conversation. That super bantamweight division, I quite like Ray Vargas, who beat Gavin McDonnell. I was impressed by him. But that division looks quite light for these guys to pick their way through. Is that your take as well?
Yeah, I mean, the IBF champion is Iwasa, and he lost quite comprehensively to Lee Haskins to become when Lee Haskins became mandatory for Randy Caballero. That was obviously a long time ago now. So it shows kind of the lack of strength, I guess, in the division. If Iwasa is one of the champions, but yeah, very light division. There's not too many, there's not even like the unknown quantity fighters that you have in the division. It's just there's not much strength and depth in that division.
And yet, the super flyweight division, it's a division that I've come to relatively recently. But you have to say now, Kaliafai, Yerwin Ancajas, obviously Saul Rungvisai, and then you've got some of these sort of old hands, the Gonzalez's, the Quadrases, the Estradas. You do have to, even I have to admit that this is a division that's really, really catching fire. Where does Yerwin Ancajas sit in the division for you? Is he someone who can, forge his way to the top?
Yeah, I did say last week that he had a very good win against Arroyo, a few fights ago, and obviously
and
Manny Pacquiao obviously is very, very high on him. He's one of those fighters, he can adapt. He's a very smart fighter when he needs to be. And yeah, he's a very, very good fighter. I think he's just he's very much a fighter that can do different things and he can adapt to different fighters. And I think he's a handful for anyone at 115 pounds. You look at obviously Estrada versus Quadras. That was a very close fight, but Estrada obviously got the decision. He'll be fighting Rungvisai next. So there's a potential fight there. And Ancajas, he's not really aligned with obviously a proper promoter, I guess, or big name promoter at the least. So getting the fights, I guess, for him would be relatively easy. He people will pay him not too much money. Think obviously they look at Conlan, they would think, okay, Conlan's he's a British to Euro level fighter. He's done a good job on him. But let's bring him over and get a unification fight. He's a handful for anyone. He's a real problem. Kaliafai is big at the weight he's imposing. He's a good boxer in his own right. He's a tough fight for anyone in the division as well. Chocolatito's still there. There's fighters still there, who have plenty to offer in the division. But it's definitely one to keep an eye on. I'm looking forward to the Rungvisai Estrada fight. That could be a bit of a war.
Definitely, yeah. Interesting division. Yeah, any further comments from yourself on any of the undercard action, mate?
Can't think of anything off the top of my head. Not too much else to add. It was a good card, though. I for what I got to watch of it, it was very enjoyable.
Yeah, and it looked like a good atmosphere and a big attendance there as well. Let's go again to Jay. I'll just see if we can have a bit more luck there with Jay. Jay, can you give us a sound check, please, mate?
Mic check. 1, 2. Was that Shigan?
Whoa,
mate. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle. I'm just trying to work out if we can battle through or if it's too bad to try. Let's. What was
Can you
that?
hear me?
Yeah, that came through all right. Any other standout performances on the undercard from you, mate?
No, I thought Paddy Barnes did really well. He looked a lot better, not as rushed as usual, a bit more composed and showed these.
I'm
He's
sorry,
a
mate.
good.
It's not a goer. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, sorry, mate. It's the same, like having JN. Let's hope he can get some broadband. Cool. All right, guys. Does anyone else have any more comments from on last week's boxing?
Yeah, can I just say I'm delighted that Jay's internet is breaking up because we don't have to listen to him so much.
Brutal. Paul's just dropped me a little note. He's going to drop off for a minute or two and then come back. So it's going to be me, Jet, and Tom, and then hopefully Paul and Jay will be back in 5-10 minutes, even with Irish Tom's well wishes. Right, let's us move on to some of the news in boxing, and a lot of news to discuss this week. I guess the first place, probably the biggest breaking news this week, Haye versus Bellew is off. No one on this panel is going to be totally surprised by this news. It does seem that there's genuine intention to make the fight again and to reschedule it for 2018. Clearly that's where the money is. Is this becoming the end of the line for David Haye? Are we at that point, guys?
David Haye is done. Absolutely done.
Do you think if you're Tony Bellew, or actually no, even just you as Jet, do you think David Haye's chances of actually winning this fight are decreasing? I mean, the guy is aging, and not only is he aging numerically, but every time he goes into camp, his body is being slowly but surely destroyed. I mean, are we getting to the point where a guy like Tony Bellew will legit beat David Haye on merit, Jet?
Yeah, it's very possible. I think it was you and Ultra Tech. I saw both your videos this week about the sort of pullout, and both made valid points that both of the guys are going to go into the fight as thinking that they could beat the other man, and for that it'll make I guess better viewing than it would have done previously. But David Haye obviously he's knocked over. I don't want to say it. It's not nice to say, but he's knocked over two bin men, and obviously he's gone into a fight with a semi-credible, semi-decent name in Tony Bellew. And Tony Bellew, actually, someone made a point on your pound-for-pound resume, your top 10 British pound-for-pound resume or something like that. Tony Bellew definitely did deserve a mention. He has some fairly decent names on there, but that's besides the point. He's gone in there, and obviously he's lost. But injury and whatnot, he's it's difficult for David Haye now. If he had this fight and he was fully fit and he did win, the Anthony Joshua payday would be immense for him. He could ride off into the sunset, and he could he could look back on his career, I guess, with having a hefty chunk of money in his bank account, and not have to kill himself through camp. But yeah, he I don't think he's got a realistic chance of beating Bellew even later down the line. I'll stick my neck out on the line. I was gonna pick Tony Bellew to win. I think David Haye at even this sort of level is done. But I guess we don't have to see the fight until further notice.
Oh, I really think, the more I think about it, I really think that Dillian Whyte is going to fight Joshua in the spring or summer next year. And I'll tell you why. Dillian Whyte is proving a real headache for Eddie Hearn. They've tried to make the Brazil fight, it's flopped. They've tried to make the Lucas Brown fight, it hasn't happened. They've tried to make Parker, they've tried to make Wilder. They've tried to make all of these fights and they're not happening for Dillian Whyte. Even the Chisora fight hasn't been able to be made. So, you know, Dillian Whyte is proving to be very, very hard to match up. AJ, you know, the David Haye fight is gone for now. The Wilder fight, the Parker fight, you know, they may not be a million miles away, but they're risky fights. I honestly see that Dillian Whyte fight happening. From Hearn's perspective, it's a low-risk fight. AJ's beaten him before, beaten him handily before, and you know, Dillian Whyte hasn't looked fantastic, so it's a low-risk fight. It's very high reward. The two guys together are just box office. You know, it's going to create a huge amount of hype, huge amount of beef, which we know sells pay-per-views these days. Yeah, for my money, expect that fight in 2018. Am I right or am I wrong, guys?
Very possible.
Yeah. It's probably not the fight that we're hoping for, you know, but I really do see it as realistic, you know, unfortunately. Tom, Haye Bellew off. Disappointed or pleased?
I was disappointed. I had bought ringside tickets for myself and my missus to go to that fight, and now it's been cancelled.
Oh, yeah? Well, you'll always be able to attend a rescheduled date, mate. Or you could sell your tickets on StubHub, so it won't be a disaster for you. Somehow
I won't be able to get my money back.
Bought those tickets somehow.
I won't be able to get a refund on my ticket from StubHub, though. That's the only thing.
No, understand that the tickets are going to be honoured for the original date, but the suggestion online seems to be that they won't be refunded, which has caused some controversy, which I guess is understandable. What about the Dillian Whyte AJ fight, Tom? I'm thinking this fight is realistic. Do you think it's going to happen, or do you see them going different routes?
I hope it doesn't happen. I don't think we should. I don't think we should be talking about what fights are realistic in that kind of way, because that defines what we end up getting. We should be, you know, fighting for the best fights. So Dillian Whyte fight, I don't know one hardcore fan that wants to see that.
Yeah, no, I think that is a fair comment, Tom. I won't disagree with you on that. Paul, are you there, mate? Or are you still off? If you are there, Paul, you're on mute. Let me ask you guys when Paul's away. Jet, this AJ Joseph Parker fight, you know, a lot of relatively humorous, relatively entertaining press conferences from Joseph Parker's side, Duco Promotions. Relatively entertaining, but at the same time, even in the nicest possible way, ever so slightly amateurish. What's been your take on this whole saga and promotion?
Yeah, so obviously you sent it to the guys this morning, and I was reading it while I was at work, and I don't know what to say. Like I don't know what to actually respond. It's actually quite childish if you look at the actuality of it. Obviously Duco have come out and said never been dropped. Okay, I understand they've never been dropped. That's fine. No, they're obviously offering a sizable chunk of money, with Parker obviously paying out of his own pocket if they can find footage. But then they've come out and also said things that we're only doing this to prove that to get Joseph Parker a fair split. So they're kind of contradicting what anything they've put out previously. They've just contradicted themselves, and they're just acting a bit like hypocrites, to be honest. And listen, there's a time and a place to sit down and discuss a fight. There isn't a need for them to put out some lame sort of I don't know. It was the video itself was very poorly constructed. Let's be honest about it. It was not. There was Lawrence Okoli on it and saying, "Yeah, well, I dropped him," and there wasn't really any sort of. It's just weird. There isn't really anything more to say on it. it's quite unprofessional, to be honest. I'm not saying Eddie Hearn is professional, because at times he does act unprofessional on social media, but this is unprofessionalism, probably of the highest order.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the bright side slightly, one thing we can say is, as a minimum, negotiations are taking place for Parker versus AJ. And to be fair to Team Parker, they have shown a willingness to negotiate and a willingness to be realistic. You know, at first, their team came out and said they wanted a 40% split. They've now said that they would want a 35% split. I mean, we're moving in the right direction, and a 35% split. You know, I know some boxing fans don't like talking about splits, but I think it is very relevant, because if the splits aren't agreed, the fights don't happen, and we want the fights to happen. And certainly, I'd much rather see Joshua Parker than Joshua Dillian White. Let's put it that way. You know, 35% it's not a million miles off yet. I mean, let's hope this is a fight that can be dragged over the line, even if it is kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, you know, to be fair, you gotta commend Duco. At least they're talking. People are now talking about Joseph Parker. You know, I've seen some comments online that at least they've done this. I know it's they've said obviously it's probably not the right way to go, and it's pretty silly. But you know, at least people are talking about Parker. What's you know, what's Wilder's team doing for him? What's you know, other people's team doing for them? They're not spoken about. But what I did find fascinating in the press release was they said they were in talks for a fight with Lucas Brown, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And they said they had various other offers to go to China and Russia. So yeah, lucrative offers was the phrase they used, I think. And if so, go for it. There's no need to, you know, put this out in the public forum, I guess. I understand, as I said, I understand both sides of the argument. But if they're saying that, you know, go for those fights or go for those lucrative opportunities. There's no need for them to go to, you know, come to Joshua's, like sort of downplay Joshua and his achievements. And I'm not a Joshua fanboy, or I'm not a Parker fanboy or anything like that. But it just seems from the promotional side of Parker, it's just a bit far-fetched. They're saying one thing, but you know, they're doing something completely different, because I think they know that Joshua is the absolute cash cow in the heavyweight division. So they're trying to play both sides of the stick, and it's working to an extent, because obviously they're negotiating with Eddie Hearn and obviously Team AJ, but at the same time they're releasing stuff and talking about different stuff that's completely irrelevant, you know, at the same time. So it's just a bit all over the place, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say is they are showing willingness to fight, a genuine willingness to fight. They're not outpricing themselves. They're negotiating. They're showing a willingness to be flexible, and they're not a million miles off. You know, some people will still think 35% is too generous, but it's not a million miles off. Let's put it that way. So if at the end of next year, the big fights don't happen, you know, if we don't have the fights, if we're sat watching Joshua versus Dillian White at Wembley, then I think the hardcore will be able to reflect back on this and say Joseph Parker was only after 35%. I mean, the sad fact of the matter is, and I know this may surprise some of our listeners who are tuning in from the US, or some of our listeners who are tuning in from New Zealand, frankly, Joshua White is probably a bigger commercial fight than Joshua Parker.
110% is bigger. Sorry,
yeah. I totally agree, mate. And as sad as that is to say,
much bigger. Why
Joshua White will be a cheaper opponent, and it's a bigger fight. So if they are inclined to avoid the risk, that option is there. But at least we can now say that there's been something on the table, and we can question that decision making.
Why would what you said is spot on? Why would Eddie Hearn risk his investment in Anthony Joshua? You know, Parker's probably a better all-round fighter than Dillian White. But why would he risk him against, you know, why would we risk AJ against Parker when he could fight Dillian White for double the money, maybe double the money, and he's already beaten Dillian White. but he knows it's going to sell. You know, as a promoter, obviously that's his job to weigh it up. What makes commercial sense for his fighter at the same time as building his brand, and that builds brand value for AJ, as well as putting a ridiculous amount of money in his bank account. So I mean, you got to. I think the public, obviously, we don't want to see the White rematch, but you got to look at it and go, what's going to make AJ the most money? And Eddie Hearn loves a pound note. You're in his payroll as well. So yeah, just that's all there is to say on it. Hopefully the fight gets made, but it's not a gimme.
Yeah, good fight if it does get made. Paul, what's your take on this saga, mate?
Sorry, just recap. I had to step out for a second. Sorry about that.
No worries. So we started by talking about Haye Bellew being off. Yeah. Then I speculated that with Dillian Whyte being so hard to match up, they may look to do a Dillian Whyte AJ fight. And then we started talking about the situation with Joseph Parker and how Parker's team, despite some somewhat amateurish call-outs, had negotiated to take a 35% split, and we were speculating on whether that fight might happen or whether Hearn would be inclined to put Joshua in with Dillian Whyte and keep it in house. What's your take on how the situation will develop, mate?
Yeah, look, David Haye's writ off. David Haye needs hazard lights sticking on either side of him, and then just like wheel him off somewhere. That's it. I'd feel sorry for him if he weren't such a toss pot. I've got a prediction, right? I'm going to stick my neck out here. I've got a bit of a prediction, yeah? We'll get AJ White and we'll get Bellew Parker. Bellew wants to go for a world title. He said that from the start, right? He'd love to. I've seen interviews with him, heavyweight champion of the world. I'd really get behind that. He's really only about big fights and big money fights at the minute. Parker, it would build Parker's name in the UK, which makes the AJ fight a bigger fight. I think that's because Dillian Whyte was tweeting like fucking that he was like about stepping in. The only thing that I think makes it less likely is the fact that it'd be really short notice for somebody like Parker. Although he does strike me as somebody that probably stays fit, So I think that's more like
Paul, because I don't think they can risk it. I think there's so much money in Bellew Haye too. I don't think they can risk Bellew getting beat, in order to ruin that rematch. I think commercially they've got to wait, don't you?
Well, I just think like if you were looking at the situation with David Haye right now, if you look at the last sort of like 5 years, 6 years of David Haye's career, it's been injury after injury after injury after pullout after pullout after injury after pullout. He is clearly a guy whose body is breaking down on him. I think there is a high likelihood that David Haye's finished, and I think there's a high likelihood that they may know this. And if that's true, and they do know this, yeah, what's the next best thing? I know from what Bellew says, he'd like to win a world title. He sees Joseph Parker as beatable. There's been a few back and forths on Twitter. Look, it's fantasy at this point. It's just I'm only saying it because if it happens, I'll look like the Oracle, yeah. But no, it's not as crazy as, I don't know, Amir Khan Alvarez or Kell Brook Gennady Golovkin. Like if you think about those fights, like can you remember when those fights, particularly Khan Canelo, like fucking everybody was just dumbstruck, mate. So like, look, less more incredible things have happened in the sport of boxing, shall we say, and there's my little prediction. If it don't happen, I'll look like a wanker. If it does, I'll look like the Oracle. So it's all good.
I think Joshua White might happen, but I'm not so sure about the other half.
Joshua White is definitely a bigger fight at this point than Joshua Parker. I agree with Jet there. I think it's a much bigger fight at this point, given the rivalry, Dillian White's profile in the UK, how well the first fight did, the way Dillian White can sell a fight. AJ's kind of nasty streak is coming out now, isn't it? It's kind of like the should we say the PC mask is starting to fall, I think, with AJ.
He certainly caught some headlines recently, let's put it that way. But
have you discussed that? Yeah.
I haven't. And the reason I haven't is because the
Inflammatory.
facts aren't overly clear. There's a suggestion that there was hacking involved and etc. And I guess I don't really have too much of an opinion on it until the facts are known, really.
Yeah, to be honest, regardless of that, anyway, I just think like in a private conversation, it's kind of like, who hasn't written something that is probably questionable at some point in their life? Let's be honest.
I mean, we've all done things that are questionable, but I think there's things that are questionable and things that are very, very questionable. And it depends where you draw the line, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, like, to be honest, I'd almost rather avoid it until there's clarity. I don't know Anthony Joshua. I don't want to slate him and, call him out for things that I have zero understanding of whether they're true or not.
He hasn't commented on it yet, has he?
His team have put out a press release saying that he's been hacked.
Right, but he hasn't actually commented on it on himself.
No, not him personally. No.
Coogan hasn't gone down there to put it on him yet.
He's actually on holiday in the UAE. So, no, he hasn't done any sort of media stuff, but that may be because of his location, I guess.
Yeah.
Who believes it was hacked?
Yeah, Tom, I'd kind of rather avoid it, mate, if you wouldn't mind, because
no, because I think it's a lot of. I just, from my point of view, it's just like two guys slagging each other. Probably, I don't believe it was hacked. Who cares? Two guys having a mouthing off session against each other. There's a big difference between a white guy saying white supremacist and a black guy saying black supremacist. It's just a very different thing, and they're not equivalent. And anybody who thinks they are is fucking idiot. I don't care what guys say to each other in private. I think it's a load of bullshit.
Let's ask the question on everyone's lips. Tom, are you watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here this year?
I am in my arse. I'd say I have never watched more than 5 minutes of it in my entire life. So
you don't have a TV, do you?
I don't, and that's exactly why I don't.
That's exactly why.
Do you know what it is? It's like crack cocaine for the masses. It's like the capitalist system just trying to fry your fucking brain full of bullshit. It's the worst shit out there. It's worse for the nation than heroin addiction. That fucking stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who, I personally have watched I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I must admit, I've never indulged in heroin. But having read stories about it, I'm not sure it's quite as bad for you as the heroin, But
that's because you're an addict, Tom. You're an addict and you can't see it.
You're in denial.
Mild entertainment this week.
Yeah, and I've got a question for you. When has watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here ever given you such a nice, deep sense of calm as the hit you get off a good needle of heroin?
Yeah. Irish, you seem determined to bring my channel to its knees tonight. No, we certainly. I wouldn't from experience if I commented further.
Gossip. Let us know if the subscriber numbers goes down as fast as it went up. Will ya next week?
There you go. I will do. We've been making slow and steady progress on the subscriber numbers, and then Irish Tom landed. What has anyone on the panel been watching it?
No. The only thing I've seen even remotely related to it was a couple of boxers. In fact, I think Kell Brook might have been one of them, talking about voting for Khan to eat some creature's testicles or something. No, basically.
Fair play. Jet, I know you're an addict for this kind of stuff. Have you been tuning in?
Unfortunately not.
Bloody hell, I'm the only one then. Okay. Well, so far, I'll just give a few highlights. The show started with Amir Khan being asked to introduce himself. And he introduced himself as Amir Khan, an Olympic champion. So that was how it started. Later on, I saw him refer to himself as a world champion. So clearly some misunderstanding from Amir Khan, as not only was he never an Olympic champion, but he's certainly not been a world champion. Khan then went on to express his horror at the amount of leaves there were in the jungle, saying he really didn't anticipate so many leaves in the jungle as he was seeing. And there's been one or two other fairly fantastic moments, including Khan getting stopped by a python in what can only be described as a devastating knockout. Highly entertaining stuff, I must admit. But maybe it's just me who's got the pond life level intellect to be tuning into this stuff. I'll move it on, seeing as I'm the only one on the panel who's interested. Guys, moving back to boxing, George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. announced. Looks like it's going to be February in Manchester Arena. Your reaction to this news, guys? See, I thought it was one of the best fights in British boxing.
Yeah, it's
in Manchester.
Where it is doesn't matter, that's all.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed because I was going to go to that if it was in London. I'm a bit pissed off.
That hasn't taken place in down in London. I think London was the initial intent, so I wonder if they struggled to get a place. But obviously, that's going to be one of the most eagerly anticipated bouts there is in the sport, and let's just hope the excitement for it continues. I guess with as the promotion starts to build. But clearly, one of the most exciting fights of 2018, and one that's good that it's confirmed so early.
Can I just ask you something a second? Did you just say a second ago that Amir Khan's definitely never been a world champion? I thought that was what I heard you say.
No, Olympic champion.
I thought you said he was an Olympic champion and he's never been a world champion. That could be my mistake then.
I did say he introduced himself as an Olympic champion and he said that I am a world champion. So what I was meaning to say is he isn't a world champion currently, and he has never been an Olympic champion. Quite possible I slip of the tongue, Paul. And if that is the case, I apologise to Amir Khan and his army of fans. Not my intention, I promise. But there you go. Let's move it on to discuss some of the boxing taking place next week. Next week, probably the biggest fight is the return of Sergey Kovalev against Vyacheslav Sabransky, BoxRec's number 17th ranked light heavyweight. Sabransky is 19-1. He's been knocked out once in a loss to Sullivan Barrera. Of his 19 wins, 16 of them come by way of knockout. He got a majority decision win over Yuneski Gonzalez, which is probably the best bit of form on his resume. Jet, have you seen much of Sabransky, mate?
Yes, I actually have. He's a decent operator. He's not anything too spectacular, but does all the basics well. Saw the fight against Barrera. I think he knocked Barrera down and Barrera knocked him down. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I thought Barrera done a decent job on him in the latter part of the fight and got the knockout win. But if Kovalev has anything left, he should be beating Sabransky. It's for the WBO world title, I think.
Is it really the vacant world title?
Yeah, the same title he lost. It's the same. It was the first title he ever won. When he beat Cleverly. It's
the vacant title. I'm sure that's what I heard. So
yeah,
it's for the world title.
Ah, right. I see. I actually didn't realise that.
Kovalev versus Anthony Yard is incoming.
Well, yeah, it may mean that Anthony Yard rethinks his position in the WBO ranking. What have you made of some of the press around this? I mean, I haven't followed it closely, but a lot of people are saying that Sergey Kovalev has, let's put it this way, made some admissions about some of his failings outside of the ring in the lead up to those Andre Ward fights.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not in a position to discuss his personal life, obviously, but he's obviously made some stuff that he doesn't live the life outside the ring, and he was regularly.
Said that he's been on the booze, Jet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite heavily on the booze, and he used to go out a lot with his mates, and he never really used to take the training seriously. He used to go regularly back to Russia. Obviously, he was training with John David Jackson at the time. He's with a new trainer now, and he's just said I've learned from my mistakes, and he's kind of just said I'm back now. So. What I will say is he probably should have done that in his last fight. He had a big opportunity to kind of right all the wrongs in of the Andre Ward first fight, and he kind of flattered to deceive, I guess. And bit of a shame, but he's still got something to offer the game, I guess. And him versus Beterbiev would be a good fight. I'd like to see that. That'd be a bit of a war.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting one. Good to have him back in the mix, I guess. Tom, have you seen much of Sabransky, mate? You there, Tom?
Sorry, what is it? The Shabransky Kovalev fight?
Yeah, you seen anything of Sabransky or got anything to predict on that one?
I think I have seen him, but I don't think too much of it. I can't remember. It's one of those random opponents. I'm not too interested in the fight, to be honest.
Okay. Paul, what about yourself?
Fought Barrera, didn't he? He
got
Barrera.
He lost to Barrera.
Yeah, he got.
Yeah, I think I saw that fight, but that's probably the only one I saw.
He beat Yunieski Gonzalez as well, the one Alexander Bosdik sparked recently.
Yeah.
I mean, Shabransky's he's all right. If Kovalev's got half of what he sort of like had, it's probably easy work. I'd say Kovalev by knockout. Kovalev's kind of like, look, man, as a fighter, I'm a big fan of Kovalev. I think he's a really good fighter. His boxing skill is underrated. He's not just a puncher. He's got a lot of skill. I think as a human being, it's just like awful. Fucking like all of these excuses. Like, I wasn't living the life and whatnot. Like, there was no excuses when he was absolutely sparking everybody. He was fine then, but. Look, I thought he won the first Ward fight. I thought the second Ward fight was an absolute travesty. But Kovalev's got a history of doing this. Like, anything that goes remotely wrong, he's fishing for excuses, or he's just denying it happened. He was beaten by Beterbiev twice in the amateurs, and both times he said, "Oh no, he beat him, and it was corruption and whatnot." It's kind of like anything that goes wrong, he just seems to sort of like reach for excuses and can't sort of like, oh, look, sometimes somebody else is the better man on the night. Sometimes the decision just don't go your way, and that's it. I did think kind of like the whole Ward saga was kind of like a bit unfair, I didn't think that was right, but the other thing that's been suggested, I was talking to somebody the other day, is like, Kovalev had a fear factor before. There was a kind of like, he was kind of like seen as the boogeyman. I've seen an old Hatman video where Hatman was sort of like saying, "Is there anybody that can even be competitive with Kovalev?" This was only 2 years ago. There's a suggestion that he's lost some of that now, which inevitably he probably has. Is Shabransky the guy to find that out? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I just don't think he's got anywhere near enough. Better Bibbs the fight that I want to see. Stevenson, I've almost just lost hope on that one now, and I almost don't care as well. How old Stevenson now is about 92 or something.
39.
So
He's
yeah,
39.
so yeah,
Bivol will be a good fight for the guys as well. And
There you go.
Godzik.
Stevenson is 40 now.
Bivol, yeah.
Yeah, he's a
40.
midget.
He still doesn't have a meaningful fight lined up.
I think Stevenson probably will just have one last cash out fight and leave it there. But I don't think he wants any parts of Kovalev, because I think he knows that he'll probably lose that fight. And I think if Kovalev is anything like he was pre-Ward, I think he beats Stevenson quite easily. To be completely honest,
there was some news that Stevenson was going to fight Bellew Jack in January, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside. There's nothing at all on that.
Yeah, that was a while. That was a couple of weeks ago, weren't it, Jeff?
Yeah.
That just lost momentum. That,
you know what, that division has absolutely fallen apart. So you've got Stevenson in his 40s. You've got Andre, greatest of all time, Ward, retiring. You've got Nathan, greatest of all time, Cleverly, retiring. Bernard Hopkins, obviously, retired out of the mix. You look at who's left. You know, Bramer's moved down to super middleweight. Beterbiev has recently won a world title, but look, fairly average. He's in his 30s now. Elida Alvarez, his career's never really caught light. He's now 33. Even Bellew Jack, he's one of the standout names. He's 34, and I think he's only had one fight in the division. You kind of feel that in about 2 years' time, all of the names in that division will have gone. They'll have moved on. They'll have taken L's. They'll have retired. They'll have gone on to other things. You feel that is a division where somebody new can come in and absolutely run through that division. And people are going to say Anthony Yard. I like to look very much at Dimitri Bivol. One of these guys can really, if they time their run, they can walk through that division.
I agree. I think Yard could do it. If he is what he looks like he might be. It's the same with Josh Taylor down at 140. It's the same sort of deal. A few of the names kind of like leaving Terence moving up, and I think in a couple of years, and I think Anthony Yard could be the guy that does that. Bivol as well is the other guy, of course. Like,
I make one other left field suggestion, right? George Groves, because if George Groves loses to Chris Eubank Jr., he needs to, he'll need to do a bit of reflection. He'll have lost twice to Frotz. He'll have lost to Bellew Jack. He'll have lost to Chris Eubank Jr. For me, Groves, the stamina problems, as he's getting older, maybe the stamina problems, the punch resistance problems, the vulnerability problems, maybe that is partly being influenced by the amount of weight he's having to cut to make 168, because he's a very, very, very big guy for the weight. Maybe Groves could step up. And I'm not saying Groves goes and beats Sergei Kovalev or beats Adonis Stevenson necessarily, but I don't think these guys are going to be in the division in 18 months' time. Maybe he can do some things at light heavyweight as well.
But Groves is nearly 30, isn't he? I mean, like, for a guy of his age as well, he's been in a few wars, hasn't he?
He has, yeah.
I question that, to be honest. I don't know if he's got. I question that. I think some of the younger guys might just have a bit too much for Groves at this point, to be honest.
An even more far-fetched one. Oh, sorry, Gossip, go on.
No, you go. I was just going to say, like, there are going to be people like Yard and Bivol who'll be hitting their peak, but I do see openings. I don't see it as a deep division, but go Jet, go.
I was going to say even an even more like left-sided pick, maybe Chris Eubank Jr. Because Chris Eubank Jr. The Eubanks are crazy. They'll go. Chris Eubank Jr. will probably go up. You never know if he feels he's inverted commas cleaned up at super middleweight. if he beats Groves and then potentially Callum Smith in the final, he'd probably think, you know what, I'll face De Gale, win, lose or draw. I can move up to light heavyweight, win a version of the world title there, knock over a couple of, guys that he should be knocking out, and, sail off into the sunset. Maybe, you never know with him, he might even go up to cruiserweight. His old man probably says, go to cruiserweight and follow me.
Yeah, Callum Smith could easily move up as well. Easily.
Gilberto Ramirez.
There's Vosdick as well. Alexander Vosdick, he's good.
Yeah, he's really good. Top rank guy, isn't it?
Yeah, he fought on the Lomachenko, the same one Usyk fought, and there was Usyk, Lomachenko, and Vosdick. Vosdick knocked Gonzalez out, weren't it? Second or third round, I think.
Yeah, he's a good fighter. He's got some decent names on his resume already.
Yeah. I think he's probably going to be one of those contenders as well.
Let me ask a random question. What if the Super Series does 2 new divisions in 2019? What divisions do you think they will do?
2 new ones.
Yeah, so like we've had cruiserweight and super middle this time. Which ones do you think they'll target?
I think probably I don't know. Maybe welterweight might be one.
I was going to say that as well. I would say if it was towards the end of 2018, I'd say featherweights. Featherweights will probably be there, but it depends who goes in there, because there's names that I don't think would actually join, and there's other names that may be in there that are, Rob Brandt type of level, and they're not really as good as the other sort of the other guys in the draw.
Heavyweight would be nice, but it probably won't happen.
I don't think heavyweight and welterweight are realistic, if I'm honest, guys. I think the money that those guys need is too much. I do think featherweight could happen. I wonder if super flyweight could happen, actually. I wonder.
Lightweight, possibly?
Yeah, lightweight isn't impossible. Maybe even light heavyweight, all of this talk. Maybe they do it light heavyweight.
On welter though, I know what you're saying. Historically, there's been a lot of earners in the welterweight division. But if you look at now, Floyd's gone, Thurman's getting older, Garcia's kind of a bit inactive and whatnot. And for me, he's not really a welterweight anyway. For me, some of the guys that are kind of there that look like they might sort of emerge as the top of the pack at welterweight are not big earners. Crawford's not a big earner. He's not a big. He's.
I don't think Errol Spence is a big earner either.
Errol Spence is not a big earner, and that's one of the reasons I say welterweight. I think welterweight's primed for something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't looked at it that way. I kind of, if you look at the top welterweights. Let's include Crawford. You'd think Crawford, Kell Brook, Thurman, Spence, obviously, maybe Porter, maybe Amir Khan. You'd think these are guys who have earned some serious money in their past. But do you not think so? I don't know.
Well, I think these guys that are putting on this these Super Series are stumping up good money, and I don't know, maybe with the exception of Khan, I don't know, a few of them might not have huge earning potential now. I don't know. And I don't think Cal Brook's going to stay at 147 anyway, to be honest. I think he's really going to struggle to stay at 147, and I think he'll move up to 154, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I suspect they will wait to see what fights become available, and they'll make a decision. I suspect they'll look for a cash out. Now, be that Amir Khan, post I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here, I don't know. But I suspect they won't really plant a route as such. They will more just survey the landscape and see what fights become available and what fighters become available.
On the subject to Cal Brook, if you look at Cal Brook, I think I was thinking about this the other day. his career, I mean, like, it might be just about done. Like, he might have just hit his peak. I think Eddie Hearn, like, I don't know, it's not just Eddie Hearn's decision. I don't mean to put the blame at Eddie Hearn's door, but like the powers that be, including Cow himself with his big balls, I'll fight anybody, ruined his career by putting him in with Gennady Golovkin. It just, like, one fight, and he just, I don't think he'll ever be the same again, personally.
Yeah, my gut instinct is Kell Brook won't win a meaningful fight again. The only possible exception to that is if he and Amir Khan do look for one final cash-out fight against each other, I'd probably pick him to beat Amir Khan.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Fair play. One other fight this weekend I wanted to mention. It may be a fight none of you have an opinion of, but I'll just mention it because I know we have a lot of heavyweight fans tuning in. Alexander Ustinov versus Manuel Charr. Now, the fight was initially advertised as for the WBA regular title. We now understand that potentially it's a final eliminator to fight Freza Quendo for the regular title. A real bizarre situation. But anyway, it is what it is. The fight's going ahead. Charr versus Ustinov. Does anyone have an opinion on that one?
It's a great fight. Looking forward to it.
A stylistic clash for the ages, Tom.
Yeah, two, light on their feet, snappy combination power punchers. What's not to like?
The winner should fight Gary Cornish.
Yeah. BG's going Team Ustinov. Do we have anyone else bold enough to stick the neck on their line for a pick in this one?
When is that on?
This weekend, mate.
Charr.
Let's have the odds on that because Ustinov should be a heavy favourite.
I think Ustinov 8-13.
Wow, yeah, I think Ustinov will win that.
Yeah, I think Ustinov as well.
No, I think Charr for the upset.
Do you actually, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get 6-4 on Manuel Charr. Guys, I've got one other story I wanted to raise before we close tonight's agenda. And I'm afraid we've discussed some ridiculous topics on this week's podcast. We have discussed Amir Khan on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. We have discussed the Duco press release. This one may raise even more eyebrows. There's another pay-per-view bill happening in recent weeks. And it's a pay-per-view bill that some of you may not be aware of. Mick Hennessy is hosting a pay-per-view bill at a boxing venue based in Surbiton. And it is being headlined by a young lady who goes by the name of Pink Tyson. Pink as in the colour, Tyson as in Mike Tyson. My understanding is she has 7 wins, 1 by knockout. So as you can see why they've gone for the Tyson name there, given that knockout power. 1 knockout from 7 wins. She also has 1 loss on the resume. She lost against a 4-0 prospect. But she is fighting at the Tolworth Recreation Centre in Tolworth for the Global Boxing Union female world title and the Women's International Boxing Federation world title. It's her UK debut, and it's going to be on pay-per-view on YouTube against her opponent. Now, you would say maybe it's a good fight. She's fighting for all these prestigious titles on a pay-per-view bill. It must be against a good opponent. Well, let me introduce you to her opponent, Bojana Libiswenka, who comes to the win with 5 wins and 25 losses. So we are seeing Pink Tyson against an opponent with 25 losses at the Tolworth Recreation Centre on pay-per-view. Now, before people start losing their minds, one other detail I have to include is the pay-per-view price here is not equivalent to a standard pay-per-view. The pay-per-view, I believe, is either £1.50 or £2. So it is Team Groves is saying in the chat it's £1.50. So it's a vastly reduced pay-per-view. I have got to question the business sense here. I mean, how many pay-per-view buys does this do? Let's say it does 1,000 pay-per-views. Let's say it does 1,000. Then you've bought in 1,500 quid pay-per-view resume. Now, obviously, YouTube are going to take a cut of that. So you're probably talking less than 1,500 quid revenue. Let's say it does 5,000 pay-per-view buys, which, if I'm honest, I would say is wildly optimistic. Yeah, but let's play devil's advocate and says it does 5,000 pay-per-view buys. Let's say 5,000 people register on YouTube, enter their credit card details, and decide they want to pay for this fight. It's bringing in revenue of £7,500. And obviously, out of that revenue, you have to pay tax, you have to pay YouTube, etc. So we're talking, in the interest of boxing promotions, a tiny amount of money here. Surely, surely, if you've got a prospect like this, you're going to want to maximize visibility. Now, if you could make 100 grand on pay-per-view, I'd get why you do that. There's not a lot of money in women's boxing. It's probably not going to sell a lot of tickets. I get why you'd want to take the money and run. But surely, for the sake of sums of money at this level, what you're going to want to do is have it free to air. Even if, I'm sure no broadcaster is going to pick this up. I mean, Sky aren't going to come in with a bid for this, let's be honest. But surely business sense would be to put it on YouTube free to air. And then, it may get a few hits. A few people may share it. A few people may have a look at her and may be more interested in seeing her fight again if she's as devastating as her surname suggests. For me, and I'm someone who's not against pay-per-view. I'm not one of these boxing fans who's got some religious opposition to pay-per-view, who only sees it from one perspective. But this is just madness. I mean, Jet, you're more sensible than I am. What's your take? Am I missing something here?
Well, you're missing the fact that the small profits that Mick Hennessy will generate from this will help pay for his pie fund. And... yeah, that will do him nicely for Christmas and get him a nice turkey too.
Brutal.
Harsh.
What do we have any panelist who's going to be paying the £1.50 to review this fight?
You know what? I don't even care that it's £1.50. I don't know what fucking planet he's on. I wonder whether it's a delayed reaction to fucking April the 1st and he's fucking April Fools or something. It's like, if you can get, like, I don't know, like, what was the last non-pay-per-view card? Was Frampton, this Frampton card wasn't a pay-per-view card.
It wasn't pay-per-view, although it was via subscription services, but no, it wasn't pay-per-view.
Right, it wasn't pay-per-view. So you could watch Kyle Frampton fucking, fight in a 10-rounder for free.
The last free, sorry.
So you have to pay $150 to watch Pink Tyson against a 5-25. I mean, what? It's something like, yeah, look, either Mick Hennessy knows something we don't know about women's boxing and a potential market that there is there. I don't know. I'm not a promoter. I assume he's reasonably shrewd. He's been around for a while. I just cannot see what the fuck he's doing here, to be honest.
I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is I'm just looking at this lady. She is Greek. She's not British. So unless she is some sort of really well-known fighter in Greece, perhaps, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the YouTube channel that she is being promoted on, which is the boxing channel presented by Hennessy Sports. And they put on a promotion yesterday. Pink Tyson is ready to fight live on YouTube. And it's gone up over a day ago. And currently it is on 200 views.
Wow.
So my guess is she can't be that big anywhere in the world because, the fans aren't clicking in their millions. They've then put up a video 4 hours ago, how to buy the fight on desktop pay-per-view. And currently that's sitting on 49 views. So, I mean, you know what I'm talking about? It's selling 5,000 pay-per-views. Perhaps I've been very charitable there. I mean, are there going to be 1,000 people who pay for this? It's not the money, you know, it's £1.50. It's just, will people be bothered to actually log in and pay for it? You know, put their credit card details in. Will people be bothered? I don't know.
To be like, of those 200 people that watched that video, 180 of them were me. I would just watch it on repeat. I fucking love that. But like, you know, Mick Hennessy, no joking, like, I don't think they'll do 100. They won't do triple figures of people. Who the fuck's going to watch that? Barring she's from a different country and her mates will pay for it. But look,
how the mighty Fole, like, was it 2 years ago in Germany with Fury for the world title against Klitschko to what was that venue you said there? With fucking Pink
Tolworth.
Let me just. It is. This is according to Boxer. It is the Tolworth Recreational Centre. I'll tell you what. Seeing as we're
sounds like somewhere you'd have old people playing bingo, doesn't it? Like,
I'm going to type this into Google. There's certain reviews, good selection of weights and cardio machines. They have a place for a birthday party to hire.
I wonder if your old personal trainer mate would be there.
Let me have a look and just see if there's an undercard. Oh, there is an. Oh, actually, I've been slightly harsh. There is an undercard of some description. John Joe Nevin 8-0 versus Lee Connolly. Lenny Dawes is out. Lenny Dawes is something of a name. Naylor Ball,
who's finished though.
Yeah, but he is something. Look, I'm clutching at straws. Naylor Ball is a 3-0 heavyweight prospect who's quite rated. Chris Eubank's other son, Nathaniel, is on the bill.
wow.
Okay, there's something of an undercard there. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not rushing to pay pay-per-view for it, but okay. Interestingly, the Pink Tyson fight that is being sold as the headline is perhaps why do you go and call yourself Tyson if you've got one knockout from 8 fights?
Somebody probably told her she had power in her early career before her career started.
Tony Bellew
called herself that. Yeah. Carries power, man.
Oh,
yeah. We know Gossip was going to be buying this pay-per-view. He loves the pay-per-view.
I love pay-per-view, but even for me, you know, like, it's just so. I feel it's just so short-sighted, you know. Like, maybe it would have got 5,000 views, and you know, maybe if she'd looked great, people would have written about it on the forums. You know, it's just, as I say, I can understand. I mean, the Huey Fury Parker fight, right? That was a bit of a question of one, but you know, no matter, we don't know what numbers that did, but we know that would have done a certain amount of numbers at a tenner a go, and we will have had a certain revenue. You know, the revenue might have been not in the millions, but it's going to be at least some money. But this you're talking about, I mean, the revenue here is, you know, really, to risk losing the. Anyway, I think I'm losing my mind.
Can you imagine how, like, a guy like Lenny Dawes, like, he's not by any stretch of the imagination an elite fighter or anything, but he's a bit of a name and whatnot. Like, can you imagine how they must feel, like, boxers with their, you know, boxers are very prideful usually, being told you're on the undercard of the next event. Oh yeah, who's the main event? Pink Tyson, the female boxer. Like, I mean, like, that's got to be a bit of a kick in the balls, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they'd have been better off selling it as, you know, Chris Eubank Jr.'s son looking to bounce back from his loss against a durable journeyman, you know, with Pink Tyson on the undercard, you know. And if you'd stuck that on midweek, you know, etc., maybe a few people would have tuned in on YouTube, you know. But just crazy for me.
But still pay-per-view.
Anyway, I needed to get that off my chest before we wrap up for the night. Let me pass it around the panel, see if anyone's got anything more to throw into the mix. Jet.
Nothing from me.
Paul.
I've got to give a shout out to Ao Obasuzi, the comment of the evening in the chat there. I heard Pink Tyson dropped AJ in sparring.
If you listen to certain press releases, yeah.
I heard AJ admitted it as well. No, nothing from me. Nothing from me. Enjoyed it tonight, lads. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Enjoyed it too. Irish Tom.
Well, that must go down as the worst 15 minutes ending of a show we've ever had.
Irish, you know what time it is.
Against pay-per-view. Gossip is actually against pay-per-view. But only when it's about a person we've never heard of before. Excellent. One other thing I'd like to say as well is that there's been a lot of fools out there at the weekend accusing Frank Warren of stealing Sweet from Eddie Hearn, when anybody in the know knows that was an original Carl Frampton anthem. So with that in mind,
oh yes.
Is that actually the truth?
Yeah.
If I'd have known, Tom, I'd have had my ukulele at the ready.
Irish knows how to end the podcast.
Well, I'll wrap it up with that in the background. But guys, we're on 63 thumbs up. That's a poor show. You're even getting Irish Tom playing you out. Smash the thumbs up button, please. Let's give it a bit of support. Thanks to everyone who's joined. It's only been the real hardcore who's joined tonight. As we went live, Eddie Hearn and IFL TV dropped a 1 hour long video that the whole boxing world is glued to. So appreciate people have been watching that. You've also had Amir Khan and I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, Andy Apprentice on. So you've had your options tonight. So the 110 people who stuck with us from start to finish are the real BG hardcore. And I want to give a shout out to every single one of those. Thanks also to everyone who watches this after it's been uploaded to the channel. Appreciate your interest just as much. Please hit the thumbs up button. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please subscribe to Jet's channel if you haven't done so already, which is Boxing Discussions. He's threatening some more activity on that channel in the not too distant future. And yeah, that's it, guys. Over and out. Till next week. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good evening, everyone.
Yes, guys.
Ciao. Have a good Wednesday.
Have a good Wednesday.